You will never be a mother. Poor women don't deserve to have children." Victoria Assis's words sliced through the chilled air of the most expensive fertility clinic in New York like poisoned blades. What she didn't know was that the cleaning lady scrubbing the Italian marble floor at that very moment carried a secret that would change their lives forever. It was a Tuesday in November, 3:15 in the afternoon, when Mariana Fernandez, 35 years old, hair pulled into a tight bun, wearing the faded blue uniform of a contracted cleaning company, ran the damp mop over the same spot for the 20th time. Not because the floor needed it, but because her hands were trembling too much to go on with her work. The tears she tried to hide dripped into the bucket of disinfectant water, mixing with a cleaning product that cost more than her entire monthly grocery budget. The Genesis Clinic occupied 3 floors of a glass-paneled building on the Upper East Side. Each consultation cost $5,000. Each in vitro fertilization procedure started at $50,000. The walls were lined with abstract paintings worth more than apartments in the outer boroughs. The water served in the waiting room was imported from France. The Italian leather sofas could pay for a full college education for a working-class kid. Victoria Assis sat on one of those sofas, legs crossed with calculated poise, her $80,000 Hermes bag resting delicately at her side. 40 years old, with perfectly styled blonde hair and nails done at a salon that charged $300 per session. She was leafing through a magazine about elite motherhood while waiting for her appointment. It was her 13th attempt. $600,000 had already been poured into the dream of becoming a mother. Around her, other wealthy women waited for their turns. Business executives, bankers' wives, heiresses, all united by the same desire and by bank accounts big enough to pay for it. The air smelled of expensive perfume and disguised despair. Mariana kept cleaning, her back hunched, trying to remain invisible as always. But today was different. Today was November 18th. Today marked exactly 3 years since her life had collapsed. The tears were impossible to contain. They slid silently down her face as she scrubbed a floor that already shone like a mirror. "Why are you crying?" Victoria's voice rang out loud and clear, making every head in the waiting room turn. "Did you lose your precious little mop?" Some women laughed. Others pretended not to hear, burying their faces in magazines. The 2 receptionists exchanged uncomfortable glances but didn't intervene. A client paying $50,000 per procedure was always right. Mariana slowly straightened her back, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I won't bother you anymore." "Bother me?" Victoria dropped the magazine and leaned forward, a predatory interest glinting in her blue eye. "Darling, you're polluting my air with your poor people's sadness. Do you know how much it costs to be here? Do you know how much I pay to avoid seeing someone like you sobbing in the corners?" "Victoria, leave her alone." One of the women tried to intervene softly, more out of embarrassment than compassion. "Leave her. Patricia, please." Victoria stood up, her $5,000 Louboutin heels clicking against the marble. "We're here investing fortunes to create the leaders of tomorrow, and this creature is crying while mopping the floor. I bet she's got 5 kids at home, all unruly, all a burden on the government's dime." Mariana gripped the mop handle until her knuckles turned white. "I don't have children, ma'am." "You don't?" Victoria laughed, a sound both crystalline and cruel. "Well, at least you have some sense. Can you imagine what a tragedy it would be A child born into that misery, growing up with no perspective, turning into yet another dead weight on society. Each word was a slap. Mariana knew women like Victoria. She had met hundreds of them in another life, when she wore a white lab coat instead of a faded blue uniform. But today, especially today, the cruelty cut deeper. "You know what I think?" Victoria went on now with an attentive audience. "I think there should be a law. Anyone making less than $10,000 a month shouldn't be allowed to reproduce. It's cruel to bring a child into the world without proper means." "That's outrageous." The same woman tried again. "Outrageous is wasting public money on people who contribute nothing." Victoria was on stage now, performing for her captive audience. How many cleaners' kids become doctors? How many become entrepreneurs? 0. They only reproduce poverty and ignorance. Mariana let go of the mop. The handle clattered against the floor, the sound echoing through the room. Silence followed. "You're right, ma'am." Mariana's voice was low but steady. "Children from poor families rarely become doctors." Victoria smiled triumphantly. "See, even she agrees." "But when they do," Mariana went on, lifting her eyes for the first time, "they're usually better doctors than the rich ones because they know real pain." Victoria's smile froze. For a second, something flickered in her eyes, a shadow of doubt. But pride spoke louder. "Well, look at this. A mop and bucket philosopher." She turned to the other women. "Want to bet she's going to give us the usual excuse? That she never had the chance? That the system is unfair, blah, blah, blah?" "I had the chance," Mariana said simply. "I had every chance." "Oh, really?" Victoria crossed her arms, her gold bracelets jingling. "And you wasted them all, it seems. Ended up cleaning the floors of those who knew how to seize life. Sometimes we clean floors to remember we once had blood on our hands." The sentence hit the room like a bomb. Victoria frowned, not understanding. The other women exchanged confused looks. "What are you talking about?" "I'm saying you're right. I'll never be a mother." Mariana took one step closer. "But not for the reasons you imagine." Victoria felt the air shift. The submissive cleaning lady had vanished. In her place stood someone different, someone with a presence that didn't match the worn-out uniform. "You know what?" Victoria decided to raise the stakes, unsettled by the change. "I'll do better. I'll give you a chance to change your life." She opened her bag and pulled out her checkbook. Every woman held her breath. Victoria Assis was known for grand, cruel gestures. $100,000. She spoke loud and clear. "I'll give you $100,000 if you manage to have a child before me. Any child. Adopted, stolen, doesn't matter. If you little cleaning lady become a mother before me, Victoria Assis, I'll pay you $100,000. The silence was absolute. It was the kind of cruel bet only the very rich make, treating other people's lives as entertainment. "But," Victoria continued, "when I manage to get pregnant first, which will happen in today's appointment, you admit in front of everyone that poor people should never dream of motherhood." Mariana looked at the clock on the wall. 3:30 in the afternoon? Victoria's appointment was scheduled for 4, 30 minutes away from the moment she had been waiting for months, 30 minutes away from the end of a farce that had already cost more than $500,000. "I accept," Mariana said. Victoria blinked, surprised. She expected begging, indignation, maybe even aggression. She didn't expect calm acceptance. "You accept? You actually accept?" Victoria laughed. "Darling, You realize that in 30 minutes I'll walk into that room and come out pregnant? It's my last viable egg. Preserved with cutting-edge technology, $50,000 just for today's procedure. I know, Mariana said simply. You know? How do you know? Because I read your medical file. Another silence, this time charged with a different kind of tension. How did you? That's a crime. A violation of medical privacy. Victoria's face flushed with rage. It is, Mariana agreed. Just like what they've been doing to you for the past 2 years is a crime. Victoria took a step back as if she had been punched. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you've already spent $600,000, 12 attempts, 7 different doctors, all telling you the same thing in slightly different words, just enough to keep your hope alive and your bank account bleeding. Shut up, Victoria whispered, but her voice shook. Do you want to know why I was crying? Mariana went on. Today marks 3 years since I lost my medical license. 3 years since I stopped practicing medicine. Do you know why? Victoria's legs seemed to buckle. She braced herself on the arm of the sofa. Because I exposed a scheme built on selling false hope to desperate women, charging fortunes for useless procedures, falsifying patient records, hiding the real test results. You're lying, Victoria said, though her voice lacked conviction. Dr. Claudio Mendez, Mariana said. Your doctor. My former boss. The man who destroyed my career because I refused to take part. The sound of that name spoken aloud made every woman in the room hold her breath. Dr. Claudio was the pope of fertility treatments in New York. He treated celebrities, politicians, the city's elite. In 30 minutes, Mariana glanced at the clock again. You'll walk into that room. He'll tell you everything looks perfect. He'll charge $50,000. He'll implant what he'll call your last viable egg. And Victoria could barely speak, and it will be a lie. Just like the last 5 attempts were lies. Because your eggs died 2 years ago, Mrs. Assis. All of them. Even the ones supposedly frozen in that lab. The silence that followed Mariana's words was so heavy it seemed you could cut it with a knife. Victoria Assis remained motionless for long seconds, her face shifting through disbelief, terror, rage, and finally settling into a mask of desperate denial. The other women in the waiting room seemed to have forgotten how to breathe, their eyes darting between the millionaire and the cleaning lady as if watching a duel no one had foreseen. You're delusional, Victoria finally managed, though her voice had lost every trace of arrogance. A jealous cleaning lady making up insane stories. I'll call security right now. She grabbed her phone with visibly trembling hands, but Mariana continued speaking in that same unnerving calm she had adopted since dropping the mop. Dr. Mariana Fernandez Silva, license number 54321, specialization in reproductive medicine from the University of Havana, master's in reproductive biotechnology from the University of São Paulo, PhD in female infertility from the University of Campinas. The credentials came in a precise sequence, each title pronounced with the clarity of someone who had repeated them thousands of times in other circumstances in another life. 15 years of experience in assisted reproduction, over 3,200 procedures performed, a 68% success rate in cases deemed impossible by other specialists. Patricia, the woman who had tried to intervene earlier, let out an audible gasp. My God, I know that name. You're the doctor who made Fernanda Cavalcanti's twin pregnancy possible? The case that was in all the medical journals? The memory seemed to trigger a chain reaction, the other women murmuring, recalling stories, connecting dots. Mariana gave a slight nod. her eyes never leaving Victoria's increasingly pale face. Fernanda was 47, early menopause, 3 miscarriages, 5 failed IVF attempts. Every specialist had given up. I developed a specific experimental protocol for her case. Today, her twin girls are 8 years old and studying at the Dalton School. "That's impossible," Victoria whispered, but the conviction in her voice was slipping away like water through her fingers. "If you were really a doctor, you wouldn't be—" She gestured vaguely at the faded blue uniform, at the bucket of dirty water, at all the material evidence of a life lived at the bottom of the social pyramid. "You're right. It is hard to believe," Mariana agreed, moving across the room with a grace suddenly incompatible with her supposed position. A doctor who published 37 articles in international journals, who was a keynote speaker at human reproduction conferences in Paris, Berlin, and Tokyo, who developed the optimized vitrification technique that increased the survival rate of frozen eggs by 40%, now mopping the floors of a clinic where she once headed the embryology department. She bent down and picked up a folder hidden behind the cleaning cart, a detail no one had noticed until that moment. From it, she pulled a series of documents and began laying them out across the Italian glass coffee table. Diplomas, certificates, scientific articles, photographs. In one, a younger Mariana in a pristine white lab coat received an award from the Secretary of Health. In another, she stood beside Robert Edwards, the Nobel laureate who developed in vitro fertilization. "Case of Maria Helena Rodriguez," Mariana began to recite, her voice adopting the professorial tone that had once been her trademark. 42 years old, husband with azoospermia, stage 4 endometriosis, both fallopian tubes obstructed. Solution: ICSI with high magnification morphological sperm selection, embryo culture in modified sequential medium, transfer at the blastocyst stage. Result: healthy triplets, born in 2019. Victoria had sunk back onto the sofa, her legs seemingly unable to support her. The other women drew closer, forming a semicircle around the table where the documents spread like pieces of a puzzle, revealing an extraordinary and tragic story. "Case of Ana Beatriz Fontana," Mariana continued mercilessly. 38 years old, polycystic ovary syndrome, insulin resistance, 3 recurrent miscarriages due to thrombophilia. Customized protocol with metformin, low molecular weight heparin, micronized progesterone, optimized vitamin D dosage, successful twin pregnancy, delivery at 37 weeks. "I know Ana Beatriz," one of the women murmured. "She said the doctor who performed the miracle had died." "For all practical purposes, I did die," Mariana replied. And for the first time since she began speaking, a shadow of pain crossed her face. "A doctor without a license is a ghost. A revoked professional is worse than dead. She's cursed. No institution will hire me, not even as a receptionist. The best I could get was this cleaning job, and only because the outsourcing company's owner doesn't run background checks." "But why?" Patricia asked, her voice heavy with a mix of admiration and horror. "Why did they take away your license? What did you do?" The question hung in the air for several seconds before Mariana turned to face the group, her back straight, her chin lifted with a dignity that defied her worn-out uniform and work-roughened hands. "I exposed an egg trafficking scheme," she said simply, and the impact of her words was like thunder out of a clear sky. "I discovered that some elite clinics, including this one, were buying eggs from poor women for $5,000 and selling them to wealthy patients for $50,000. But that wasn't the worst part. The real crime was that they took viable eggs from patients, told them they weren't suitable, kept them to sell to others, and left the original patients stuck in endless treatments with unusable biological material. Victoria buried her face in her hands, a low groan escaping her carmine-painted lips. Every word Mariana spoke was like a dagger driven into hopes already shattered by years of failed attempts. I had proof, Mariana continued, her voice gaining strength from the memory. Documents, recordings, testimonies. I took everything to the state medical board, to the police, to the district attorney. You know what happened? The doctors involved were too powerful, too connected. Dr. Claudio Mendez isn't just a fertility specialist. He's the son of a judge, the son-in-law of a senator, a close friend of the president of the medical board. She walked to the window overlooking the busy avenue below, her eyes lost in memories of that terrible period. In 2 weeks, they flipped the story. I went from whistleblower to accused. They forged documents claiming I had falsified research, performed unauthorized experimental procedures, put patients at risk. Every colleague who could testify in my favor was threatened or bought. Every patient I had helped was persuaded to remain silent. December 3rd, 2021, she said, with surgical precision. The day they revoked my license, I walked out of the medical board building like a criminal. My bank account was frozen by a fraudulent lawsuit. My apartment was seized to pay supposed compensations. Within months, I went from one of the country's most respected specialists to a pariah, a liar, according to the official documents. But you kept coming here, Victoria said suddenly, her voice hoarse with repressed emotion. Why keep working at the place that destroyed your life? It was a valid question, and Mariana turned to face her directly, her brown eyes locking onto Victoria's blue ones with an intensity that transcended their current social positions. Because I knew one day I'd have this conversation, Mariana replied. Because for 3 years, I've watched women like you walk in here full of hope and leave in ruins. Because I clean these rooms after the appointments and find real lab results tossed in the trash, replaced with falsified versions that keep the treatments going. She returned to the table and pulled a large brown envelope from the bottom of the folder. Your real test results, Mrs. Wasis, not the ones Dr. Claudio shows you. But the true ones, the ones the lab sends directly, which are intercepted before they ever reach your hands. She placed the envelope on the table with deliberate care, as if it contained radioactive material. Victoria looked at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. Her hands trembled so badly she had to try 3 times before managing to open it. This can't be true, she murmured as she tore the seal. Dr. Claudio said he promised $600,000. Premature ovarian insufficiency diagnosed in January 2023, Mariana recited from memory, while Victoria read the documents, her eyes growing wider and wider. FSH85, LH92, estradiol under 20, antral follicle count 0 in both ovaries. Ovarian biopsy performed in March of the same year. Complete absence of primordial follicles. In layman's terms, your ovaries stopped functioning 2 years ago, Mrs. Assis. There are no viable eggs, no frozen eggs, no biological possibility of pregnancy with your own genetic material. The document slipped from Victoria's hands and fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of her uneven, almost gasping breaths, as if the air had become too dense for her lungs to process. But he said, at every appointment, he said we were close, that the next protocol, that the frozen eggs. The sentences came out in fragments, each one carrying the weight of a destroyed hope, a dream crushed by someone else's greed. The supposed frozen eggs you pay $3,000 a month to maintain belong to another patient who died 5 years ago, Mariana revealed, her voice gentle but implacable. Her name was Carolina Mendez. No relation to the doctor, just a coincidence. She was 28, had ovarian cancer, and froze 15 eggs before chemotherapy. The family never claimed the biological material. Dr. Claudio uses those eggs to keep several patients paying maintenance fees. That's monstrous, Patricia whispered, clutching her handbag as if it could protect her from the brutal reality being exposed. It's profitable, Mariana corrected, bitterness in her voice. $600,000 from Mrs. Assis. $450,000 from Mrs. Carmen, who comes on Thursdays. $800,000 from the Rodriguez couple who've been in the program for 4 years. Multiply that by 50 active patients, and you have a multi-million-dollar business built on empty wombs and false hope. Victoria Assis collapsed. It wasn't a movie-style breakdown with screams and objects thrown. It was a silent, total implosion, like a building collapsing from the inside, its facade intact for a few seconds before everything gave way. She slid off the Italian leather sofa and onto her knees on the marble floor, her perfectly manicured hands pressed against the cold surface as if she needed to confirm that something in her liquefied world was still solid. The sobs came in waves, beginning as muffled hiccups she tried to smother with her hands, then exploding into a primal wail that echoed down the clinic's corridors. The other women instinctively stepped back, the discomfort palpable in the air. It wasn't only the awkwardness of witnessing someone from their social circle unravel, it was the terror of recognizing they might be in the same situation, that their own treatments could be equally fraudulent. Patricia moved first, kneeling beside Victoria and placing a hesitant hand on her shoulder, but the gesture seemed only to intensify the woman's despair. 2 years, Victoria managed between sobs. 2 years of daily injections, of hormones that drove me crazy, of renewed hope each cycle. 2 years explaining to my mother why she still didn't have grandchildren, hearing my husband say everything was fine while I saw the disappointment in his eyes. 2 years being kind to that monster, believing every word, paying every absurd bill without question because he was the best. Because everyone said if anyone could do it, it would be him. Mariana stayed where she was, watching the scene with a complex mix of satisfaction and compassion. The woman who minutes earlier had humiliated her for supposed social inferiority was now literally at her feet, destroyed by the same arrogance that had made her trust someone blindly for status and reputation alone. It was a poetic role reversal, but Mariana felt no pleasure in revenge. She had seen too many women in that position, had held too many hands while delivering definitive diagnoses, had learned that the pain of infertility recognizes neither social class, bank balance, nor last name. "Mrs. Assis," Mariana said softly, moving closer and crouching to meet Victoria at eye level. "You need to stand up. You need to be strong for what comes next. At 4 o'clock in 23 minutes, Dr. Claudio will call you. He will perform the fake procedure as he always does. He'll charge $50,000 and he'll keep doing it as long as you allow it." Victoria lifted her mascara-streaked face, her blue eyes now red and swollen, and met Mariana's with a desperate plea. "What do I do? Please help me. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll pay whatever you want. 1 million, 2 million. Please, you're a doctor. You can help me. There must be some treatment, some new technique, anything." The irony of the moment was not lost on anyone in the room. The very woman who had confidently declared that the poor didn't deserve to have children now begged on her knees before a cleaning lady, offering fortunes to buy what money could not. Dead eggs don't resurrect with wire transfers, and failed wombs don't regenerate with checks. Mariana stood slowly, her faded blue uniform suddenly resembling a mantle of authority. "I will help you, Mrs. Assis, but not in the way you imagine, and not for money. I'll help you under 3 conditions, and they're non-negotiable." Victoria rose with difficulty, Patricia still supporting her by the arm. "Anything," she repeated, her voice hoarse from crying. "Name the conditions." "First condition," Mariana began, her voice carrying the authority that once commanded operating rooms and medical conference halls. "You will apologize publicly, here and now, for every cruel word you said about poor people not deserving to have children. You will admit you were wrong, that money doesn't determine the capacity to love, that your arrogance blinded you. And I don't want empty apologies from someone who's desperate. I want you to understand, to feel, to internalize how your words could have destroyed someone who was already suffering." Victoria swallowed hard, her pride fighting one last losing battle against her need. The other women watched in absolute silence, some discreetly recording with their phones, documenting this extraordinary moment. "Second condition," Mariana continued. "The $100,000 you offered in that cruel bet. You'll donate it today to a fertility treatment fund for low-income women. I'll create the fund, I'll manage it, and I'll make sure women earning minimum wage get access to the same treatments you had. And you will be the program's patron. You'll lend your name and influence so other wealthy women contribute. Third," and here Mariana paused, her eyes sweeping every face in the room before returning to Victoria, "you will admit, out loud, right now, that motherhood has nothing to do with genetic material, with your own eggs, with your own belly. You will admit that a mother is someone who chooses to love, care for, and protect, regardless of how the child came into her life." Victoria remained silent for long seconds, processing the conditions. When she finally spoke, her voice was unrecognizable, stripped of all the arrogance that had defined her. "I accept every condition, and I apologize. Not just apologize, I beg forgiveness." She turned to face not only Mariana, but all the women present, her voice gaining strength as she went on. "I was a monster. I spent years believing my money made me superior, that my bank account gave me the right to decide who did or didn't deserve to be a mother. I said unforgivable things about people who are probably far better mothers than I could ever be. I treated human beings as less than garbage just because they earned less than I did, and now, destroyed, humiliated, discovering I was deceived for years, I finally understand that money can't buy what truly matters." The tears returned, but they were different now, tears of recognition, of genuine shame, of transformation. "Mariana, I am sorry. I am sorry for every cruel word, for every look of contempt, for every time I treated you and others as inferior beings. You are superior to me in everything that truly matters: dignity, honesty, humanity." Mariana nodded, accepting the apology with the same dignity with which she had endured the insults. "Now I'm going to tell you something you need to know," she said, her voice gentle but laden with emotion. "I have 3 children. None of them came from my uterus. Pedro, 16. I found sleeping at the door of the clinic where I worked. He'd run away from a shelter where he was being abused. Maria, 14, was the daughter of a patient of mine who died in childbirth and had no family. Joan, 11, has Down syndrome and was abandoned in the hospital where I was on call. Victoria's chin trembled as she absorbed the information. The cleaning lady she had declared unworthy of motherhood had 3 children, 3 lives saved, 3 unconditional loves that no genetic link could surpass. Pedro is in his junior year of high school. He wants to be a doctor like I was, Mariana continued, pride evident in her voice. Maria plays violin in the state youth orchestra. She earned a full music scholarship. Joan is the light of our home. His smile can brighten the darkest day. They are my children in every way that matters. I chose them, they chose me, and we built a family no DNA test could improve. How? Victoria asked, her voice barely a whisper. How do you do it? After everything you lost, how can you keep going? Keep loving, caring? Because being a mother, Mariana replied, isn't about passing on your genes. It's about passing on love, values, hope. It's waking up at 5 a.m. to make breakfast for Pedro before his early prep class. It's staying up all night when Maria is nervous about a performance. It's celebrating each of Joan's small victories as if he'd won a Nobel. It's choosing every day to put their needs before your own. And that, Mrs. Assis, can't be bought, injected, or implanted. It's chosen. The clock on the wall read 3:52 p.m. In 8 minutes, Victoria was supposed to be in the consultation room for yet another fraudulent procedure. But she didn't move. No one moved. The moment was too dense, too important to be interrupted by schedules and appointments. I don't know if I can, Victoria admitted, the vulnerability in her voice touching everyone. To adopt, to love a child who isn't mine, I don't know if I'm capable. I was raised to believe family is blood, DNA, a last name. How do you undo 40 years of conditioning? Mariana stepped closer, and in a gesture that surprised everyone, including herself, took Victoria's hands in hers. The cleaning lady's hands, rough and dry from chemical cleaners, held the millionaire's manicured hands. You start by starting. You change by recognizing that the love you feel for a child who doesn't exist yet is real. That love doesn't need DNA to find its destination. There are thousands of children waiting for that love, children abandoned by people who had the DNA but not the love. But what if I can't love? The question came out heavy with genuine fear. You already love, Mariana replied with conviction. You love so much you spent $600,000, submitted yourself to painful procedures, endured hormones that wreck the body and mind. That love already exists. It just needs to find the right child to receive it. And when it does, you'll discover that love doesn't ask about DNA, doesn't check birth certificates, doesn't run blood tests. Love simply happens. At that moment, the clinic door opened and Dr. Claudio Mendez appeared, his white coat immaculate, his professional smile freezing as he took in the unusual scene. His VIP patient on her knees beside the cleaning lady, documents spread across the table, other patients recording with their phones. "What is going on here?" he asked, his voice reaching for authority but betraying nerves. Victoria rose slowly, supported by Mariana. When she spoke, her voice had a new strength, a determination born of truth. "What's going on, doctor, is that your fraud is over. I know about the dead eggs, about 2 years of lies, about the $600,000 stolen through useless procedures." The doctor's face drained of all color. He looked at Mariana, and recognition was instant. "You," he whispered. "Mariana, what did you do?" "What I should have done 3 years ago," Mariana replied. "The difference is that I'm not alone now. Now there are witnesses, recordings, proof, and more importantly, there are women willing to fight for justice." The New York State Supreme Court building was packed that May morning, reporters jostling for space with harmed patients, honest doctors who could finally speak, and onlookers drawn by what the media had dubbed the biggest scandal in American reproductive medicine. Victoria Assis sat in the front row, her serene face a dramatic contrast to the desperate woman who had crumbled in the clinic 6 months earlier. Beside her, Mariana Fernandez wore a simple but elegant suit, her hands no longer roughened by cleaning chemicals, but firmly holding a folder of documents that had changed dozens of lives. The judge had just announced the sentence. Dr. Claudio Mendez, 15 years in prison for aggravated fraud, document forgery, and criminal conspiracy. The Genesis Clinic had its license revoked and its assets frozen to compensate the victims. More importantly, the state medical board announced a review of Mariana's case, with a strong indication that her license would be restored along with a formal apology for the injustice committed. But the real transformation was happening in a modest building in Midtown Manhattan, home to the Renasser Institute, the project born from that dramatic afternoon at the clinic. With Victoria's initial $100,000, plus donations that poured in after the story became public, 32 fertility treatments for low-income women had already been carried out. The success rate was 60%, not by miracle, but because procedures were done honestly, with the best protocols, without the greed that turns medicine into a marketplace of illusions. Victoria had become the project's chief ambassador, using her influence and connections to raise funds. In 6 months, she had organized 3 benefit dinners that brought in $2.5 million. More important than the money, though, was the genuine shift in her perspective. She spent 3 afternoons a week at the Institute, not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a volunteer, holding the hands of women who cried over negative results and celebrating with those who finally saw 2 lines on a pregnancy test. "You know what I've learned these months?" Victoria said to Mariana as they left the courthouse, a crowd of reporters held back by security. "I learned I was so obsessed with preserving my genes that I forgot to ask why. What was so special about my DNA that it needed to be passed on? My arrogance, my prejudice, my inability to see value in people without bank accounts." Central Park was especially beautiful that spring afternoon, blooming trees laying a colorful carpet across the lawns where families enjoyed the sunny Sunday. Mariana sat on a checkered blanket, watching Joan, her youngest, feed ducks at the lake with pieces of bread she had brought just for that. Pedro was studying for the SATs against a nearby tree, his books spread around him, while Maria tuned her violin for an impromptu performance that always drew small crowds of curious listeners. The sound of children's laughter made Mariana look toward the playground, and a soft smile crossed her face as she recognized the 2 3-year-old girls running barefoot in the sand, their white dresses already completely dirty, their dark hair flying as they fled the woman trying to catch them with wet wipes in hand. Victoria Assis, who a year earlier couldn't stand a stain on her designer clothes, now laughed as her adopted daughters, Ana Clara and Ana Luisa, twins abandoned at age 2 in a city hospital, turned her into a walking disaster of sand, melted ice cream, and absolute joy. The girls had fetal alcohol syndrome, the result of their biological mother's addiction, and would need medical and therapeutic follow-up for years. When the caseworker presented their file to Victoria, warning her about all the challenges, she simply replied, "Perfect. They need someone who can pay for the best care, and I need someone to teach me that love has nothing to do with perfection." "Marina! Marina!" the twins shouted when they spotted Mariana running toward her with arms wide open. That's what they called their aunt doctor, the woman who visited weekly to monitor their development, but mainly to share with Victoria the joys and challenges of real motherhood. Not the idealized kind of frustrated dreams, but the true kind. Made of sleepless nights, supermarket tantrums, crooked drawings on the wall, and hugs that cure any exhaustion. "They're more beautiful every day," Mariana said as the girl settled into her lap, competing for space and attention. "And more impossible," Victoria added, sitting down on the blanket with far less elegance than she would have a year ago. Yesterday, Ana Clara decided she wanted to be a painter and used bright red lipstick to make abstract art on the suede sofa. $300 for the lipstick, $15,000 to restore the sofa. Guess what I did? "Blew a gasket?" Mariana ventured with a smile. "I took a photo and had it framed. It's hanging in the living room next to a Romero Brito original. It's the most valuable artwork in the house." The two women fell silent, watching the 5 children play together. João had abandoned the ducks and joined the twins in the sand, his contagious laughter making the girls squeal as they built what they swore was a castle but looked more like a lopsided mound. Pedro had closed his books and was teaching the girls to make paper airplanes from sheets torn out of his notebook, every aerodynamic miscalculation greeted with delighted shrieks when the plane crashed. Maria played a simplified version of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" on the violin, the twins trying to sing along with more enthusiasm than pitch. "You know what's ironic?" Victoria said suddenly, her eyes still on her daughters. "I spent $600,000 trying to buy motherhood. Today, with that money, I could have adopted and magnificently raised a dozen children who needed a mother. I was so obsessed with the idea of my child that I didn't realize mine is about choice, not genetics." "The pain of infertility is real," Mariana replied gently. "Don't diminish your suffering. The problem wasn't your desire to be a mother. It was the system that exploited that desire, and maybe the limitation of thinking there was only one path to motherhood." Victoria nodded, a single tear sliding down her face as Ana Luisa ran up with a handful of wildflowers she had picked. "Mommy, so you can be prettier," the girl said, with the brutal sincerity of children, clearly thinking her mother needed cosmetic help after the sand war. "Thank you, my love," Victoria answered, tucking the flowers into her now messy hair. "Mariana, I need to tell you something. Remember when you said you saved me that day? You didn't save me. You gave me the chance to save myself. To save the Victoria who was buried under layers of privilege and prejudice." The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that competed with the flowers in Victoria's hair. The children kept playing, now all together in some game whose rules only they understood. One where there was no distinction between the children of the doctor who had been a cleaning lady and the daughters of the millionaire who had learned to be a mother. "A mother is someone who chooses to love," Victoria repeated the words Mariana had said a year earlier. "Today I understand that not as a concept, but as lived truth. Ana Clara had a night terror last night, woke up screaming at 3 a.m. As I rocked her, she called me Mom for the first time without anyone prompting her. In that moment, every dead egg in the world meant nothing. I was a mother. I am a mother. Not because my body created her, but because my heart chose her." Mariana smiled, the smile of someone who sees the end of one journey and the beginning of another. The Renasser Institute already had a 2-year wait list, with women from across the United States seeking not just treatment, but honest treatment. Her medical license had been restored with honors, and she now headed the assisted reproduction department of a public hospital, implementing protocols that prioritize transparency and ethics over profit. "Do you know the greatest irony of all?" Mariana said, as they began to pack up, the park emptying as evening approached. "That afternoon at the clinic, when you humiliated me, when you said I would never be a mother, you were right and wrong at the same time. I would never be a mother in the way you understood motherhood back then, but I was already a mother in the only way that truly matters." The two women embraced, an embrace that transcended their individual histories and represented something bigger. The possibility of change, of redemption, of recognizing that the walls we build between us are made of prejudice and can be torn down with truth and compassion. As they walked side by side, each holding the hands of their chosen children, the park, nearly dark now, seemed brighter than ever, as if the city itself recognized that something fundamental had changed in that meeting between a cleaning lady who was a doctor and a millionaire who learned to be a mother